Have you ever felt something before it actually happened? No clear reason, no solid evidence, just a quiet feeling sitting in your chest. And somehow, you knew it was true. Maybe it was about a person. Something felt off, even when everything looked fine. Or maybe it was a decision, a path, a choice. And before anything unfolded, you already sensed the outcome. If you're an INFJ, this isn't rare. This is your normal. You live in a world where intuition speaks louder than logic, where feelings carry information, where silence says more than words. And yet, you often question it, because other people ask for proof. They want evidence, facts, clear explanations. But you don't always have those. You just know. And that creates a quiet tension inside you. A conflict between what you feel and what the world expects you to explain. So today, we're going to explore why INFJs don't need proof to know. Not in a surface-level way, but in a way that helps you finally understand why your mind works the way it does. Stay with this, because somewhere in this video, you might recognize yourself more clearly than ever before. INFJs are often misunderstood, not because they are complicated, but because they are quiet. Most of what they experience happens internally, invisible to others. They don't always speak what they see. They don't always explain what they feel. But inside, there is a constant flow of insight, connections forming, patterns aligning, truths emerging. And this is where the confusion begins. Because INFJs don't always arrive at conclusions the normal way. They don't always gather data step by step. They don't always analyze things out loud. Instead, they arrive at answers, almost instantly. Answers they can't always explain. Answers they often keep to themselves. And yet, those answers are often right. Not perfectly, not every single time, but enough times to build a quiet, undeniable trust. One that they lead with introverted intuition. At the core of the INFJ mind, there is a function called introverted intuition. But instead of thinking of it as something technical, think of it as a lens, a way of seeing the world. This lens doesn't focus on details first. It focuses on meaning, on direction, on what things are becoming, rather than what they are right now. While others look at pieces, INFJs see the whole picture, even if it's incomplete, even if it's still forming. Their mind quietly gathers information over time, moments, expressions, patterns. And then, without warning, it clicks. A realization appears, fully formed, calm, clear, certain. And this is why INFJs often say, "I just know," because the process didn't feel like thinking. It felt like remembering something that was always there. 2. They see patterns others miss. INFJs are natural pattern seekers, but not in an obvious way. They don't sit down and consciously analyze everything. Instead, their brain is constantly observing, quietly, in the background. They notice how people behave over time, how situations unfold, how small actions lead to larger consequences. And slowly, they begin to see patterns, invisible to most people. A repeated tone in someone's voice, a subtle shift in energy, a familiar cycle in a relationship. These things don't stand out to others, but to an INFJ, they mean everything, because patterns tell stories, and stories reveal truth. So when an INFJ senses something, it's rarely based on a single moment. It's based on many moments, woven together. Even if they can't explain each thread, they can see the final image. 3. They read people effortlessly. One of the most powerful traits of an INFJ is their ability to read people. Not just what people say, but what they feel, what they hide, what they avoid. INFJs don't rely on words alone, because words can be controlled. But energy is harder to fake. They notice pauses in conversation, shifts in tone, changes in posture. They sense emotional undercurrents, tension, discomfort, excitement, fear. And they don't just observe these things. They absorb them, almost like a mirror. This allows them to understand people on a deeper level. sometimes even before those people understand themselves. So when an INFJ says something feels off about them, it's not random. It's the result of deep emotional perception. 4. They trust their inner voice. Trust doesn't come instantly, even for INFJs. In fact, many INFJs spend years doubting themselves, ignoring their intuition, second-guessing their feelings, trying to be more logical, more certain, more acceptable. But over time, something happens. They start noticing a pattern. The times they ignored their intuition, things didn't go well. The times they listened, things made sense later. And slowly, trust begins to form. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. They begin to listen more, to pause before dismissing their feelings, to consider that maybe, just maybe, their inner voice knows something important. And this changes everything. 5. They process things deeply. INFJs are deep processors. Even when they seem calm on the outside, their mind is active, constantly reflecting, revisiting moments, replaying conversations, analyzing emotions. They don't just experience life, they interpret it. They ask questions like, what did that really mean? Why did that feel different? What is beneath this situation? And this depth creates clarity, not immediately, but over time. So when an INFJ arrives at a conclusion, it's rarely rushed. It's the result of layered understanding, even if that process was invisible to others. 6. They value meaning over facts. Facts are important, but facts don't always tell the full story. INFJs understand this. A fact can be technically true, and still feel incomplete, because facts describe what is visible, but meaning reveals what is real. INFJs are drawn to meaning, the intention behind actions, the emotions behind words, the purpose behind decisions. So when something doesn't align, even if the facts look fine, they notice, they feel the gap, and they trust that feeling, because meaning rarely lies. 7. They notice inconsistencies. INFJs are highly sensitive to inconsistencies, not just obvious contradictions, but subtle ones. A smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a kind word, with a cold tone, a promise that feels empty. These small misalignments stand out immediately, even if everything else looks normal. And while others might ignore these signs, INFJs can't, because their mind is always searching for alignment between words and actions, between intention and behavior. So when something doesn't match, it creates a quiet alert, not panic, not judgment, just awareness, a sense that something isn't fully true. 8. They are highly self-aware. INFJs spend a lot of time understanding themselves, not because they want to overthink, but because they need clarity. They reflect on their emotions, their reactions, their patterns. They ask themselves, why did I feel that? What does this mean? Is this coming from me, or something else? And this creates a strong sense of internal awareness. They know their own emotional landscape, which makes it easier to detect when something external feels different. This self-awareness becomes a foundation, a stable place they can return to, and from that place, their intuition becomes sharper, more reliable, more grounded. 9. They experience strong gut feelings. For INFJs, gut feelings are not vague. They are clear, sometimes surprisingly clear. It might feel like a quiet certainty, or a strong sense of yes or no, without explanation, without logic, just presence. And these feelings don't disappear easily. They stay, they linger, they gently insist on being noticed. And when ignored, they often return later, stronger, more persistent. This is why many INFJs eventually learn not to dismiss these feelings, because they carry information, even if that information isn't immediately understood. 10. They think in future outcomes. INFJs naturally think ahead, not in a stressful way, but in a predictive way. They imagine possibilities. They see how current actions might unfold. They consider long-term consequences, and this gives them an unusual perspective. While others focus on what is happening now, INFJs are already seeing what might happen next. So when they know something, it's often because they've already explored the future path. Internally, quietly, without even realizing it. 11. They have a strong sense of truth. INFJs don't just look for information. They look for truth. And those two things are not always the same. Information can be incomplete. It can be manipulated, distorted, selective. But truth feels different. It carries a kind of weight, a quiet clarity, a sense of alignment. INFJs are naturally drawn to that feeling. They don't just ask, is this correct? They ask, does this feel real? And this question changes everything. Because something can appear logical and still feel wrong. And when that happens, INFJs notice. They pause. They listen to that internal signal. Not because they reject logic, but because they understand its limits. They know that logic explains, but intuition reveals. And when both align, that's when truth becomes undeniable. This is why INFJs don't always need proof. Because they're not searching for surface confirmation. They're sensing deeper alignment. Between words and energy. Between actions and intention. Between what is said and what is felt. And when those things match, there is no doubt. Only quiet certainty. 12. They have been right before. Experience shapes trust. And for INFJs, experience has been a powerful teacher. There have been moments where they felt something strongly, but couldn't explain it. Moments where they sensed, that person is not being honest. This situation won't end well. This choice doesn't feel right. And maybe they ignored that feeling because others asked for proof. Because logic said otherwise. Because they didn't want to seem irrational. But later, the truth revealed itself. And in that moment, something shifted. Not dramatically, but deeply. They realized, I knew this. Not in a proud way, but in a quiet, almost unsettling way. And this didn't happen just once. It happened again, and again, and again, until eventually, it became impossible to ignore. Their intuition wasn't random. It wasn't guesswork. It was insight. Subtle, quiet, but real. And this is where trust begins. Not blind trust. Not absolute certainty. But a grounded awareness that their inner voice is worth listening to. Why INFJs struggle to explain their knowing. There's something important to understand. INFJs don't just struggle with being misunderstood. They struggle with explaining themselves. Because their knowing doesn't always follow a clear path. It doesn't move step by step. It doesn't build like a logical argument. It appears suddenly, fully formed. And when they try to explain it, it feels incomplete. Like trying to describe a dream. You know it made sense. You know it felt real. But putting it into words feels limiting. This is why INFJs often stay silent. Not because they have nothing to say, but because what they know is hard to translate into something others can easily accept. The internal conflict. This creates a quiet conflict between intuition and external expectations. On one side, there is a deep inner knowing, calm, certain, unshaken. On the other side, there is the world, asking for proof, for logic, for explanation. And INFJs stand between these two, trying to balance both, trying to honor their intuition, while still being understood. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they stay quiet, sometimes they doubt themselves, even when they feel sure. And this can be exhausting, because constantly questioning your own perception creates internal tension. Why INFJs often second-guess themselves, even with strong intuition. INFJs are not always confident. In fact, they often second-guess themselves, not because they are unsure, but because they are aware. Aware of complexity, of nuance, of multiple perspectives. They don't see the world in black and white. They see layers, and this makes them cautious, careful, thoughtful. So even when they feel something strongly, they might pause, reflect, reconsider, not to deny their intuition, but to understand it more fully. Intuition versus logic, the balance. It's important to say this clearly. INFJs are not anti-logic. They don't ignore facts. They don't reject reasoning. But they don't rely on it alone. They balance it. Logic gives structure. Intuition gives direction. Logic explains the how. Intuition senses the why. And when these two work together, INFJs become incredibly perceptive, able to see both the surface and what lies beneath it. The quiet power of INFJ intuition. INFJ intuition is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't try to prove itself. It simply exists. Steady, consistent, patient, and over time, it builds something powerful. Trust. Not the kind of trust that needs validation, but the kind that comes from experience, from reflection, from repeated moments of quiet accuracy. Why others may not understand. From the outside, INFJs can seem mysterious, or even confusing, because their conclusions don't always come with visible reasoning. They might say, "I don't think this is right," without being able to explain why. And for people who rely heavily on logic, this can feel frustrating, even unreliable. But what they don't see is the depth behind that statement. The patterns, the observations, the emotional signals, all processed internally, all leading to that one quiet conclusion. A different kind of intelligence. We often think of intelligence as something measurable, something visible, something that can be explained. But there are different kinds of intelligence. And INFJ intuition is one of them. It's not always easy to quantify, but it is deeply valuable, because it allows NFJs to see what others might overlook, to sense what others might miss, to understand without needing everything spelled out. Take a moment. Think about your own experiences. Have you ever felt something strongly and later realized you were right? Have you ever sensed something was off, even when everything looked fine? Have you ever known the outcome of something before it happened? If so, you're not imagining it. You're not overthinking. You're not being irrational. You're using a different way of understanding the world. So what does all of this really mean? It means that being an INFJ is not about having all the answers. It's about sensing direction before the answers appear. It's about trusting something quiet. In a world that values what is loud, INFJs don't need proof to know. Not because they reject logic, but because they experience understanding differently. They gather signals others overlook. They feel shifts others ignore. They connect patterns others don't even see. And over time, this creates a kind of knowing. Subtle, steady, deeply personal. But this doesn't mean INFJs should blindly trust every feeling. It means learning to listen carefully, to pause, to reflect, to balance intuition with awareness. Because intuition is not about being right all the time. It's about being aligned, more often than not. And when INFJs learn to trust that alignment, something changes. They stop seeking constant validation. They stop explaining what doesn't need explaining. They stop doubting every quiet insight. And instead, they begin to move through life with a calm certainty. Not loud confidence, but quiet clarity. So if you've ever felt like you just know, even when you can't explain it, that's not something to fear. That's something to understand. Because your mind is not broken. It's simply tuned differently. And sometimes, that quiet knowing is exactly what the world is missing.